My mom skipped my graduation and said my success meant nothing because my brother was the only son who mattered, but the decision I made that day triggered a downfall that reduced their golden boy to nothing. My name's Adam. I'm 29 and I just became a multimillionaire through real estate investments. But before I get to the good part, where my family gets what's coming to them, you need to understand the complete disaster I grew up in. This is going to be long, but I promise it's worth every word. Grab some coffee and settle in. My mom, Jessica, is a textbook gold digger who married my dad when she was 23, and he was 36 with a decent plumbing business. She's one of those women who thinks her looks entitle her to everything without working for it. Blonde, fake everything, drives a BMW she can't afford, and has never worked a real job in her life. She's also dumber than a box of rocks, but thinks she's brilliant because she managed to trap my dad. My dad, Richard, used to be a solid guy, built his plumbing company from nothing, worked with his hands, real blue-collar mentality, but 27 years of my mom's nonsense turned him into this spineless doormat who just nods along with whatever she says to avoid drama. Then there's my younger brother Tyler, who's 26, and the biggest waste of space you've ever seen. This dude has had everything handed to him his entire life. While I was working plumbing jobs with Dad during summer starting at 15, Tyler was getting $400 weekly allowances and taking networking meetings at expensive restaurants. Let me paint you a picture of how bad the favoritism was. When I was 10 and Tyler was 8, I broke my arm falling off my bike. My parents took me to the emergency room, got me patched up, and that was it. When Tyler scraped his knee falling off the same bike 2 weeks later, they took him to 3 different doctors to make sure there wasn't any underlying damage, bought him a new bike with training wheels even though he was 8, and my mom posted about her brave little warrior on Facebook for a week. When I was 12, I got straight A's on my report card. My reward was a handshake and good job. When Tyler brought home a C+ in art class at age 10, they hung his finger painting on the refrigerator and took him to Chuck E. Cheese to celebrate his artistic achievement. The favoritism was insane from day one. When I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA and multiple scholarship offers, they bought me a used Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it and told me I was lucky to get that. When Tyler graduated 2 years later with a 2.7 GPA and no prospects, they leased him a brand new Mustang GT because he needed motivation to succeed. When I got accepted to State University for Business, they said, "Hope the financial aid works out," and made me fill out every form myself. When Tyler decided he wanted to study marketing at a private college that costs $55,000 a year, they took out a second mortgage without blinking and hired someone to help him with his application essays. But here's where it gets really messed up. Tyler dropped out junior year to start a social media consulting agency, which was basically him taking photos of his friends' cars and posting them on Instagram for $150 a month. Meanwhile, I'm working my tail off studying real estate finance, working part-time at Home Depot, eating ramen every night, and they act like I'm the family disappointment. Every family dinner, every phone call, every conversation somehow became about Tyler's latest business venture or networking opportunity. I'd try to share news about making Dean's List or getting promoted at work, and within 30 seconds the conversation would shift to Tyler's exciting opportunities or his innovative marketing strategies. When I was 22 and landed my first real estate internship, I excitedly called home to share the news. My mom's response: "That's nice, honey. Oh, did I tell you Tyler got invited to some entrepreneur meetup? He's really making connections in the business world." When Tyler was 23 and his business made its first $500 month, you would have thought he'd cured cancer. My parents threw him a celebration dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town, invited extended family, and my dad gave a toast about Tyler's entrepreneurial spirit and bright future. Meanwhile, when I graduated with honors and secured a $52,000 starting salary, I got a text that said, "Congrats. Can't wait to hear about Tyler's new client presentation next week." Every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering followed the same pattern. Tyler would get expensive, thoughtful gifts that showed they'd been paying attention to his interests. I'd get generic gift cards and clothes that were clearly last-minute purchases. My achievements barely got a "that's nice, honey," before the conversation pivoted back to whatever Tyler was pretending to accomplish that week. It was like living in a house where one son mattered and the other was just there to fill space. Tyler's business was the biggest joke ever, but my parents treated him like he was the next Mark Cuban. This kid convinced them to fund what was essentially an expensive hobby disguised as entrepreneurship. Let me break down the insanity. First, he convinced them to pay $12,000 for a professional website that looked like it was made in 2003. The developer was some kid Tyler met at a coffee shop who charged premium prices for basic WordPress templates. The site had exactly 4 pages: home, about, services, and contact. The services page literally just said social media solutions for modern businesses, with no actual explanation of what he did. Then came the $18,000 camera setup for content creation. We're talking professional, grade equipment that actual photographers would use for weddings and commercial shoots. Tyler used it to take pictures of his friends' cars in parking lots. The majority of his content was blurry iPhone photos anyway, but he convinced my parents that investing in quality equipment shows clients you're serious. The downtown loft apartment was the crown jewel of his delusion. $2,400 per month for a trendy space in the arts district because he needed to project success to attract high-end clients. The apartment had exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and a creative workspace that was just a desk from IKEA with some motivational posters. Tyler would bring potential clients there for strategy sessions, which were basically him showing off his expensive setup while having no actual strategy to discuss. The Tesla Model 3 lease was justified because image is everything in social media marketing. Tyler claimed that pulling up to client meetings in a luxury car showed he was successful and trustworthy. Never mind that most of his clients were small local businesses that couldn't care less what car he drove. The Tesla cost $650 per month plus insurance, and Tyler convinced my parents it was a business expense. But the real kicker was how much they spent sending him to business conferences and networking events. These were basically weekend parties in different cities where wannabe entrepreneurs paid $500 to attend motivational seminars and exchange business cards. Tyler went to events in Austin, Nashville, Miami, and Las Vegas, all on my parents' dime. Each trip cost between $2,000 and $3,500 when you included flights, hotels, conference fees, and Tyler's networking dinners at expensive restaurants. In 4 years of operation, Tyler's highest monthly revenue was $1,200. And that was only because he temporarily landed a local car dealership that paid him to post photos of their inventory. He lost that client after 3 months when they realized they could post their own photos for free. His typical monthly income was closer to $300, but his expenses were roughly $6,000 per month when you included everything my parents were covering. The most ridiculous part was listening to my family talk about Tyler's business at dinners. My mom would brag to relatives about her entrepreneur son and his innovative marketing strategies. My dad would nod along and talk about Tyler's vision and how he was disrupting the traditional marketing space. They genuinely believed Tyler was building the next big thing. Meanwhile, I graduated summa cum laude with a business degree, got hired at a commercial real estate firm for $52,000. And you know what my mom said? "That's nice, honey, but did you see Tyler just got featured in that entrepreneur blog?" The feature was a 200-word blurb in some random startup website that let anyone submit their own profile for $50. I started learning everything I could about real estate investing on my own time, spent every weekend at property auctions, read every book I could find, watched YouTube videos until 2 a.m. I was determined to build something real while Tyler was playing pretend businessman with my parents' money. The absolute breaking point was my college graduation. I had worked my butt off for 4 years, graduated top 5% of my class with a 3.87 GPA, already had a job lined up at a respected firm, and I specifically bought them 3 tickets to the ceremony months in advance. I even called them the week before to confirm and sent them the parking information and ceremony schedule. Day of graduation, I'm sitting in the staging area with my cap and gown on, getting ready to walk across that stage with my fellow business school graduates when I get a text from my mom at 10:47 a.m. "Can't make it today, sweetie. Tyler's meeting with a potential investor who flew in from Denver. This could be the opportunity he's been working toward. We'll celebrate your graduation later, promise. So proud of both our successful boys. XOXO." I just stared at that message. This investor was probably another wannabe entrepreneur Tyler met at one of his networking events. But my parents treated it like he was meeting with Warren Buffett. They chose Tyler's pipe dream over my actual tangible achievement. I looked around that auditorium and saw all these families cheering for their kids, taking photos, bringing flowers, crying happy tears. The 3 seats I'd reserved in the front section were completely empty. I felt like such a loser standing there in my cap and gown with nobody to share the biggest moment of my academic life. When they called my name and I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I heard applause from strangers and felt completely alone. The dean shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Peterson. Your professors speak very highly of your work." I smiled and thanked him, but inside I was devastated. After the ceremony, I stood outside the auditorium, watching other graduates hug their families and take pictures. I got in my Honda Civic and drove home alone, my diploma sitting in the passenger seat like a participation trophy nobody cared about. After graduation, I basically went low contact with my family, started working 65-hour weeks, learned everything I could about real estate markets, and poured every dollar into my first investment property. While Tyler was posting Instagram stories about his entrepreneur lifestyle, I was sleeping on an air mattress and studying market trends until 3 a.m. every night. Here's something nobody talks about. When you cut toxic people out of your life, even family, you suddenly have so much more mental energy to focus on your goals. I wasn't constantly stressed about their drama or trying to prove myself to people who didn't give a darn about my success. My first property was a complete disaster. A duplex in a neighborhood that was up and coming according to the real estate agent, but was actually just run down. I paid $85,000 for it, which cleaned out my savings and required me to get a hard money loan at 12% interest for the remaining $15,000. The place needed $25,000 in repairs I couldn't afford. New roof, updated plumbing, electrical work, flooring replacement, and a complete kitchen renovation. I learned to do most of the work myself out of necessity. Spent my weekends watching YouTube videos about installing laminate flooring, fixing leaky pipes, and replacing light fixtures. My dad's old contractor friends took pity on me and taught me the basics of drywall repair and tile installation in exchange for helping them on their own projects. The first tenant was a nightmare. Single mom with 3 kids who seemed nice during the showing but turned out to be a hoarder. She lived there for 8 months, stopped paying rent after month 4, and when I finally got her evicted, she left the place destroyed. I spent another $8,000 getting it back to rentable condition, but I was learning valuable lessons about screening tenants, property management, and cash flow analysis. It took me 8 months to get the duplex stabilized. But when I did, I was making $400 per month in positive cash flow after all expenses. That $400 became my seed money for property number 2. Meanwhile, my family was still obsessing over Tyler's business. During the few times I visited, every conversation was about his latest client prospects or networking opportunities. When I mentioned I had bought an investment property, my mom's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did we tell you Tyler's thinking about expanding into video marketing? He's looking at some really expensive equipment." Property number 2 was a single-family house that needed cosmetic work, but was structurally sound. I'd learned from my mistakes on the duplex and was much more conservative with my estimates. The house cost $68,000, needed about $12,000 in updates, and cash flowed $350 per month when finished. That's when I discovered the magic of what real estate investors call the BRRRR strategy: buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Once I had both properties stabilized and rented, I could refinance them based on their improved values and pull out most of my original investment to buy the next property. Property 3 was where I really started to understand the business. I found a foreclosure that banks had been sitting on for 8 months. The house was solid but looked terrible because the previous owners had stripped out all the copper, pipes, and appliances before losing it. I got it for $52,000, put $18,000 into making it rentable, and it appraised for $89,000 when finished. After refinancing, I pulled out $71,000, which meant I had less than $5,000 of my own money tied up in a property that cash flowed $425 per month. The real estate firm I worked for got bought out by a national company when I was 25. My commission structure improved dramatically because the new company had access to commercial deals and high-end residential properties. I started making serious money. Some months I'd close $200,000 in sales and earn $6,000 in commissions. But instead of upgrading my lifestyle like most people do when their income increases, I kept living like a broke college student and invested every extra dollar into more properties. Same ratty Honda with 220,000 miles. Same one-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture, eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch because they cost 50 cents each. By the time I turned 27, I owned 12 rental units across 3 different neighborhoods. I was clearing about $3,800 per month in rental income on top of my salary, but I kept it quiet and let my family keep thinking I was just some basic real estate agent making modest commissions. Properties 4 through 12 were where I really hit my stride. I'd developed relationships with contractors who gave me good prices, knew which neighborhoods were about to gentrify, and could spot a good deal from across the street. I was buying properties for 60 to 70 cents on the dollar, putting minimal money into them and refinancing out 90% of my investment. My personal favorite was property number 8, a triplex that had been vacant for 2 years because it needed a new roof, and the owner didn't want to deal with it. I got it for $95,000, put $22,000 into it, including the roof replacement, and it appraised for $165,000. After refinancing, I pulled out $148,500, which meant I actually made money buying the property. It cash flowed $1,200 per month once all 3 units were rented. But here's the crazy part. My family still had no idea what I was actually accomplishing. During one of our rare family dinners, I casually mentioned that I owned several investment properties. My dad's response, "Well, just make sure you're not overextending yourself. Real estate is risky." Then he immediately pivoted to talking about Tyler's exciting new partnership opportunity with some other fake entrepreneur. The best part? Tyler's business completely collapsed during the pandemic because small businesses stopped paying for social media services. Suddenly, Mr. Entrepreneur was back to living with mommy and daddy, but they still acted like he was some genius who just hit a rough patch. During lockdown, Tyler started 3 different businesses: a meal delivery service that lasted 6 weeks, a dog walking app that never got past the PowerPoint stage, and something called virtual networking solutions that was essentially him trying to charge people $50 to join Zoom calls where they could network with other entrepreneurs. All 3 ventures failed spectacularly, but my parents kept funding them and making excuses. "Tyler's just figuring out the right opportunity," my mom would say. "The pandemic was bad timing for his marketing business, but he's adapting." Meanwhile, the pandemic was the best thing that ever happened to my real estate portfolio. Interest rates dropped to historic lows, so I refinanced every property and pulled out even more equity. Rent collection actually improved because my tenants qualified for various assistance programs that paid their rent directly to landlords. Last year, I hit my first million in net worth. Not just on paper, actual equity I could borrow against, plus cash in the bank. At 28 years old, I had more wealth than my parents had accumulated in 30 years of marriage, but the first still kept quiet because I was having too much fun watching Tyler struggle while my parents continued enabling him. Then our local business journal decided to do a feature on young real estate moguls under 30, and somehow my name ended up on their list. The article was huge, talked about my investment strategy, my background, even mentioned how I overcame early financial challenges to build my portfolio. They estimated my net worth at $1.8 million, which was actually conservative since they didn't know about all my properties. The article included a photo of me standing in front of one of my renovated properties, and they listed out my entire investment timeline. It was impossible to deny that I had built something substantial. I didn't tell my family about the article, but apparently someone from my dad's old work crew saw it and sent it to him. Within 48 hours, my phone was blowing up with messages I'd been ignoring for months. First was my dad. "Adam saw the article in the business journal. We need to talk." Then Tyler, "Bro, what the heck? Why didn't you tell us you were rich?" Finally, my mom, "Honey, call me a sap. This is amazing news for our family. Notice how suddenly I'm part of our family again." I ignored all their calls for 2 weeks just to watch them squirm. I could see my mom was stalking my social media because she started liking photos from 3 years ago. The desperation was beautiful. When I finally answered my dad's call, the conversation was absolutely hilarious. He was stuttering and stumbling over his words, clearly reading from notes my mom had written for him. "Son, we're so proud of what you've accomplished. Your mother and I always knew you were destined for great things." "Really?" I said, because I distinctly remember you calling real estate a young man's game and asking when I was going to get a stable job with benefits. Long pause. "Then, we want to have dinner. Celebrate your success properly." I agreed to meet them at this fancy steakhouse downtown, the kind of place they would never normally go because entrees start at $45. Watching them try to act comfortable in that environment was worth the price of admission. My mom showed up dressed like she was going to a movie premiere. Tight dress, full makeup, jewelry I'd never seen before. She immediately started with this fake proud mom routine. "Adam, sweetheart, I've been bragging about you to all my friends. I always knew you'd be successful in real estate." "Funny," I said, "because 2 years ago you told me I should quit playing with houses and get a real job with a pension like government work." She got flustered and tried to change the subject. "Well, we're here now, and we want to be part of your journey going forward." That's when Tyler jumped in with the real reason they wanted to meet. "Bro, I've been thinking you know a lot about business now, and I've got this new idea that could really take off. Maybe we could partner up." I almost choked on my water. "What happened to your social media agency?" "The pandemic killed it," he said, not even embarrassed. But I've learned so much from that experience. Now I'm thinking about getting into real estate myself. You could teach me the ropes. These people had ignored me for years, missed my graduation, treated me like garbage, and now they wanted to be partners. The audacity was breathtaking. I played along for the rest of dinner, letting them pitch their various schemes and business ideas. Tyler had prepared what he called a partnership proposal on his laptop. It was 3 slides about how we could leverage our combined expertise to dominate the real estate market. The proposal basically boiled down to, I provide all the money and knowledge, Tyler provides his marketing expertise and people skills, and we split profits 50-50. I nodded thoughtfully and told them I'd consider their proposals. Over the next month, the truth started coming out through multiple conversations and some discreet investigating I did on my own. Turns out my family was in deep financial trouble. Dad's plumbing business was failing because my mom convinced him to take out business loans to fund Tyler's lifestyle instead of buying new equipment. They owed $165,000 on the house, $38,000 in credit card debt, and $52,000 on Tyler's Tesla lease and apartment. My mom's spending habits had completely spiraled. She was dropping $1,800 a month on clothes, beauty treatments, and lunches with her equally shallow friends. Tyler hadn't contributed to any household expenses in 8 months and was basically a financial dependent at 26. The really pathetic part was how they started showing up at my apartment unannounced, bringing home-cooked meals and trying to act like caring family members. My mom would call with investment opportunities she heard about from her hairdresser. Tyler kept sending me business plans that looked like they were written by a 7th grader. Tyler's latest scheme was particularly ridiculous. He wanted to start a real estate influencer Instagram account where he would post about properties I was buying and selling. His pitch was that he could build our brand and attract investors through social media in exchange for posting photos and writing captions. He wanted a $60,000 annual salary plus 10% of all profits. But the real wake-up call came when my dad showed up at my office looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. My assistant tried to turn him away, but I agreed to see him. Adam, I need to be straight with you. We're about to lose everything. The business is finished. Your mother, she doesn't understand how bad things really are. Finally, some honesty. But it was way too little, too late. Dad, where was this honesty when you chose Tyler's fake business over my graduation? Where was your concern when Mom was calling my career playing with houses? He had no answer, just sat there looking defeated while I continued. I worked construction with you for 3 summers. I learned the value of hard work from watching you build your business. But when I tried to build something myself, you treated it like a hobby while funding Tyler's delusions. He nodded slowly. We messed up. We know that now, but you're the only one who can help us. Here's where the story gets really satisfying. Instead of helping them, I decided to let them dig their own graves deeper while I enjoyed the show. I started flaunting my wealth just enough to drive them crazy. Bought a Porsche Macan S and parked it in their driveway when I visited. The neighbors definitely noticed, and I could see my mom's embarrassment when she had to explain that her disappointment son owned a $75,000 car, while her successful entrepreneur son was unemployed. I wore a $15,000 Rolex to family dinners and made sure to check it frequently when Tyler was talking about his latest business ideas. When my mom asked about it, I casually mentioned it was just a little reward for closing a big deal. Watching Tyler's face when he realized my watch cost more than his annual income was priceless. I also started bringing dates to family events, successful, educated women who made Tyler look even more pathetic by comparison. My mom would fawn over these women, clearly hoping they'd become permanent fixtures who might influence me to help the family. One dinner guest was a commercial real estate attorney I was seeing. When Tyler started his usual spiel about disrupting the marketing space, she politely listened for about 30 seconds before saying, "That's interesting. Have you considered the liability implications of your business structure?" Tyler had no idea what she was talking about and just mumbled something about still figuring out the legal stuff. My mom's behavior became increasingly desperate. She started dressing up every time she thought she might see me, bringing me elaborate home-cooked meals. First time she'd cooked for me in years, and suddenly taking interest in everything I did. She'd call with random questions about my day, my work, my friends, anything to stay connected. "Adam, honey, I was thinking maybe you could teach Tyler about real estate. You two could work together, like a real family business." "Mom, Tyler can barely manage his own checking account. Why would I trust him with real money and actual clients?" Tyler's reaction was even better. This kid who used to talk down to me about real business was now practically begging for scraps. He offered to be my assistant for $45,000 a year, claiming his marketing expertise would help me build my brand. When I laughed at that, He came back with $35,000, then $25,000. He even offered to work for free for 6 months to prove himself and learn the business from someone who really knows what they're doing. The desperation was intoxicating. I started getting calls from extended family members who had heard about my success. My aunt called to catch up and mentioned how proud my parents were of me, then casually brought up her son's college tuition struggles. My cousin reached out about a business opportunity that conveniently required a $50,000 investment for some multi-level marketing scheme. Even my mom's sister, who had barely spoken to me in 10 years, suddenly wanted to reconnect and mentioned her upcoming divorce and financial difficulties. The really pathetic part was watching my parents' friends treat them differently. At church, at neighborhood gatherings, everywhere they went, people would ask about their successful son, the real estate investor, while Tyler stood there like a piece of furniture. My dad started bringing copies of the Business Journal article to show people, clearly desperate to bask in reflected glory. But the absolute best moment came 6 weeks ago. My mom called crying. Actual tears, not the fake manipulation she usually pulled. "Adam, we got the foreclosure notice. We have 45 days. Your father's too proud to ask, but we need $180,000 to save the house and business. You're our only hope." I let her finish her complete sob story. She went on for 15 minutes about how sorry they were, how much they loved me, how they'd always believed in me deep down, but just didn't know how to show it. She promised things would be different, that Tyler would get a real job, that they'd never take my success for granted again. She offered me equity in the house, promised to pay back the money with interest, said Tyler would work for me for free, anything I wanted. The desperation in her voice was intoxicating. Then I said something that felt better than any business deal I'd ever closed. "Mom, remember my graduation? When you said Tyler's investor meeting was more important? Remember when you told me to get a stable government job instead of playing with houses? Remember when you called me the family disappointment? That was different. We were just trying to—" "No, it wasn't different. You made your choice. Tyler was your investment. I was the backup plan. Well, your investment failed spectacularly, and your backup plan doesn't owe you anything." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear her breathing, probably trying to process that her plan to guilt-trip me wasn't working. Then she started bargaining. "We'll pay you back with interest. We'll give you equity in the house. Tyler will work for you for free. We'll do anything." The time for making deals was 20 years ago when I was a kid who needed his parents' support. That ship has sailed and it's not coming back to port. I hung up and immediately blocked all their numbers. The foreclosure went through 3 weeks ago. I actually drove by the house the day the sheriff posted the notice. There was a big yellow sticker on the front door, and I could see Tyler loading boxes into my dad's old pickup truck. The Tesla was already gone, repossessed 2 weeks earlier. Dad's business went bankrupt the following week. All his equipment, his truck, his tools, everything got auctioned off to pay creditors. The man who used to employ 6 people was suddenly unemployed at 55 with no prospects and massive debt. Tyler had to sell his camera equipment, his expensive computer setup, and anything else of value he owned. The downtown loft was history, obviously. All 3 of them are now crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town that costs $1,400 per month they can't afford. Meanwhile, I just closed on a $750,000 house in the best neighborhood in town. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2-car garage, and a backyard perfect for the pool I'm installing next month. The master bedroom alone is bigger than their entire apartment. The house has a home office where I manage my real estate portfolio, a wine cellar for my growing collection, and a 3-car garage for my Porsche, my new BMW M3, and whatever toy I decide to buy next. Everything they dreamed of having but never worked for. The beautiful irony is that I could have easily bailed them out. $180,000 is honestly pocket change to me now.
I make more than that in a good quarter from my rental properties alone.
But some lessons can only be learned the hard way. My mom keeps creating new email addresses to contact me because I blocked all her old ones. The messages are getting increasingly desperate and pathetic. Last week, she sent a 20-paragraph email explaining how she finally understands what she did wrong and begging for one last chance to make things right. My dad shows up at my office sometimes, looking more broken each time. My assistant has strict instructions to have security escort him out immediately. The last time he came, he was wearing clothes I recognized from 10 years ago and looked like he'd lost 20 pounds. Success suits me much better than poverty suits him. Tyler sent me a 15-page handwritten letter that reads like something a prisoner would write to a parole board. He explained how sorry he is, how he understands now what real work looks like, and outlined a detailed plan for how he would earn my respect back by getting a minimum wage job and paying me back $50 per month for the rest of his life. The letter was particularly pathetic because he kept referring to me as the smart one and himself as the screw-up. He promised to never ask for anything again if I would just help them this one time, and swore he'd spend the rest of his life proving he could be the brother you deserve. But you know what? Forget all of them. They had 27 years to treat me like I mattered. They chose not to. Now they get to live with the consequences while I live my best life. Last week I was at the country club I just joined. Membership fee $25,000. When I overheard two guys talking about this local family that lost everything. They were describing how the dad's plumbing business failed, and they had to move into some apartment complex on the wrong side of town. I didn't say anything, but I smiled knowing they were talking about my parents. In a town this size, everyone knows everyone's business. My family went from being the couple with the successful entrepreneur son to being the cautionary tale about financial irresponsibility and parental favoritism gone wrong. Here's the part that makes this revenge absolutely perfect. Last month, Tyler got a job at Home Depot, the same store where I worked part-time in college. The manager who hired him is someone I know well from my contractor relationships. Apparently, Tyler had to explain during his interview why a 26-year-old man with no work history needed an entry-level retail job. The manager told me Tyler broke down crying during the interview, talking about how his family lost everything and he needed to become a real man and support his parents. Tyler is now making $12 per hour doing the same work I did 7 years ago, except I was also going to school full-time and building a future. My mom got a job at a nail salon making $9 per hour plus tips. This woman who hasn't worked in 25 years is now doing pedicures for tips. She has to stand on her feet 8 hours a day serving the same type of wealthy women she used to pretend to be. My dad is working for one of his former competitors doing basic plumbing repairs for $18 per hour. The man who used to own his own business is now taking orders from guys he used to compete against. His former employees make more money than he does now. The three of them together make less in a month than I spend on mortgage payments. They're living paycheck to paycheck while I'm building generational wealth. Some people might think I'm being too harsh, but here's the thing. They never loved me.
They loved the idea of what I could do for them once they realized I was useful.
That's not family. That's just parasites with shared DNA.